Since May 2021, the discovery of the remains of several hundred children in unmarked graves at the sites of 3 former residential schools for Aboriginals in Canada has sent shockwaves around the world. However, the practice of opening boarding schools for natives was directly inspired by the United States, which is not only larger in scope but also has more deeply buried secrets. Researchers estimate that over the past 150 years, the number of Native American children whose deaths were directly or indirectly related to these residential schools in the United States could be as high as 40,000. According to an article titled "Canada's Native Schools Have Been Exposed. What About the U.S.?", published online by the Christian Science Monitor, a non-profit and American religious publication, the inspiration for Canada's residential school system came from the United States. Beginning with the passage in 1819 of the so-called Indian Civilization Fund Act, the United States implemented a package of laws and policies aimed at a forced assimilation of the Native American people, and forced Native American children to attend boarding schools created or subsidized for the purpose across the country. Faced with the same so-called Indian problem as its southern neighbor, Canada in 1878 sent emissaries to the United States at the behest of then Prime Minister John A. Macdonald to study the policies involved. According to the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, an American nonprofit, 14 Christian denominations operated 367 residential schools in the United States between 1870 and 1970. At these schools, any indigenous cultural activity was prohibited, including the practice of their first language and the wearing of traditional clothing and hairstyles.
There are many lives that are affected here, not only from the students that perished here, but their descendants. Well, if we can imagine some of the students being as young as 2 years old, being away from your family, learning to be assimilated into the white culture was very devastating for many young people.
Like those in Canada, these American schools did not even bother to hide the intent to eliminate Native Americans by cultural genocide. The first such boarding school in the United States was the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, opened in Pennsylvania in 1879. Its founder, Civil War veteran Confederate General Richard Platt, had an infamous phrase, "Kill the Indians and save the man." According to the Native American Rights Foundation, NARF, Native children were sprayed with the pesticide DDT when they entered Carlisle Indian Industrial School. Between 1883 and 1918, more than 1,800 children fled this school, and almost 500 died. Other records reveal that between 1879 and 1934, in only 4 such boarding schools, at least 1,000 Native American children died, mainly due to disease. Receiving poor or no treatment, these students, once they fell ill, experienced very high mortality. Some researchers suggest that the most likely up to 40,000 Native American children died directly in such schools or because of the poor living conditions they had to suffer, and that tens of thousands more lost contact with their families and their tribes once sent to these establishments.
They came and told my mother that we had to go somewhere she'd never see us again. So they basically threatened to put us up for adoption, which happened a lot in the 70s, even in the 80s. We weren't allowed to speak our language. We were told that we weren't worth anything. We were never going to amount to anything. We were dirty. Strip us of our culture. It was a form of cultural genocide is what it was, basically. It's heartbreaking, but for myself, I have a sense of guilt. I'm a survivor. I'm still here. I'm successful with what I do. I'm successful who I've become. I feel for the ones that didn't, that couldn't.
On June 22, 2021, U.S. Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland announced that the federal government would launch an investigation into the dark history of residential schools in the United States and release an investigation report by April 1, 2022. However, according to investigative journalists, the Department of the Interior has yet to contact many former residential schools, including Genoa, or schedule searches and excavations of human remains, which will naturally cast great doubt on the authenticity and completeness of the report.